you so much for being here. My name is Etan Mabourakh. I am NIAC's organizing manager. It's info session with a group of great experts. I'm going to just start off with a quick introduction to NIAC for folks who are unfamiliar, and for a bit of context as to why we're meeting today and what we'll be discussing. So NIAC is the oldest and largest Iranian American grassroots civil society organization in the country. We are dedicated to supporting peace, diplomacy, civil rights, human rights, and equitable immigration. And I'm this discussion is extremely important and timely, especially in the aftermath of the 12-day Israel-Iran war, where we've seen the Iranian community, the Iranian American community in the US, facing an alarming escalation of ICE targeting. ICE has arrested at least 130 Iranian nationals in the first week after the war, with at least 670 Iranians being held in ICE detention as of last month. More recent sources have cited that 5,840 Iranian nationals remain on ICE's non-detained docket. These arrests are indiscriminate. They don't seem connected to any real security threat and have led to significant fear, concern, anxiety, and harm within the community. These arrests have swept up individuals of all university students. And in Los Angeles, U.S. immigration agents detained 2 Iranian Christian asylum seekers outside their home, prompting criticism from their pastor, Ara Torosian, who stated that they had fled persecution in Iran. Another impacted individual whose story gained traction was 64-year-old Donna Kashanian, who was detained by masked ICE agents in June when she was gardening outside of her home. Donna, who had been living in the United States for 47 years, who was married to an American citizen with whom she shares a daughter, presented no apparent national security threat. And yet, after being ripped apart from her family without warning, she was thankfully released on July 9th, following an outcry from her Louisiana community and intervention on her case from House Majority Leader Steve Scalise. And this shows 2 things. First, that there was never a real threat from Kashanian to begin with, and that outcry from lawmakers and the public can make a huge difference. These recent events, they underscore not only the vulnerability of our community, but also the urgent need for us as individuals to be informed and to protect ourselves and our loved ones in these times of uncertainty and heightened enforcement. And that starts with knowing your rights. Knowing your rights, it's not just empowering, it's absolutely essential right now, regardless of immigration status. Everyone has fundamental rights to due process under the US Constitution in this country. And so today's session will provide a clear overview of the current immigration and civil rights landscape. We'll try to offer practical guidance on how you can assert your rights when interacting with law enforcement and immigration authorities. And we'll discuss the critical role of community advocacy and support systems right now. We'll also explore some of the unique challenges faced by asylum seekers and refugees outside of the United States. So please remember also that while we hope this session equips you with vital information, this does not constitute legal advice. And for questions about your individual situation, we strongly encourage you to consult with a qualified attorney in your state on an individual basis, although we have some wonderful attorneys on our panel today. I will begin with some introductions to our panelists. First, we have Masih Fouladi, who is the executive director of the California Immigrant Policy Center, with a background as a lawyer, community organizer, and policy advocate focused on public affairs, civil rights, and nonprofit leadership. We also have Stephanie G., who is the senior director of U.S. Legal Services at the International Refugee Assistance Project, IRAP, where she leads the U.S. legal team, providing direct services to refugees and immigrants. We also have Amina Fields, who is the immigrant rights senior managing attorney at CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, Los Angeles. Amina and her family came to the United States from Vietnam as a refugee, and she served 10 years in the United States Air Force. She also holds a Juris Doctor at David A. Clark Law School. And then last but not least, we have Mahsa Khanbabai, who is an immigration attorney with over 20 years of experience in the field and is the founder of Khanbabai Immigration Law. She served as the director of Board of Governors at the American Immigration Lawyers Association and was appointed as the co-chair of the association's Afghan Response Task Force. She was also a part of the legal team and currently represents Rumeysa Ozturk, who she successfully defended and was allowed to remain in the United States after DHS reversed its deportation order of her. So with that, I will like to turn it over to Mahsa as our first presenter to discuss some of the immigration and civil rights landscape at the moment. So thank you, Mahsa.
Thank you, Etan. It's a pleasure and honor to be here to speak with all of you and to present with my esteemed colleagues. There's a lot to get through in the short period of time that we have. And so what I'd love to do is kind of give you a big picture of what's happening with our immigration and civil rights and what are some of the particular areas where we are seeing some significant changes, and then an outline of some of the important things that we as the Iranian American community and our broader community of immigrants can do to try to stop some of these very concerning changes. So many of you have been hearing, and as Etan outlined, we're basically facing a multi-pronged assault on our constitutional rights. And I am not exaggerating the level, the breadth, the depth of the problems. We are seeing a wholesale attempt to clamp down on freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and it's being done through the weaponization of our immigration laws. Because not only are our immigration laws outdated, but they don't have the same protections built into it like our criminal justice system does. And so the government is attempting to use the immigration laws because there is so much more discretion in there. The employees of these agencies have much less ability to be independent, like our judiciary, like our courts. And if they don't follow the rules, whatever those new rules are set by the Trump administration, then they will be fired. And we already have seen mass firings, not only in our immigration courts, but now in the State Department and obviously in many other government agencies. And the government knows that our immigration laws are weak, and their approach is to basically violate all the standard norms. They're changing policies, and they frankly don't care if they are breaking the law because their approach is sue us to stop us. And they know that many people can't afford an attorney and that they might languish in immigration detention, or they might be stopped at the airport and not allowed entry, or they may be denied a visa, and that they don't have the resources or the connections or the information on how to connect to an immigration attorney. And so they're getting away with a lot of these violations. And it's only because of communities coming together, lawyers coming together, organizations coming together to try to sue the administration to stop some of these where we've been having success. And it's going to be so important that we continue to build upon that. So what are some of the areas that we've been seeing some of the most significant erosion of our immigrant rights? Obviously, we see it on the domestic side. We see it with USCIS, which is the Immigration Office, previously known as INS, where they basically adjudicate our applications for green cards, for citizenships, our family petitions. And we see it at ICE, where there's not only massive funding now and an attempt to hire thousands of new ICE agents, but to then round up people in our communities and detain them in for-profit prisons. And then we see it in our immigration courts, like I said, with the firings of so many judges, with changing of policy. And we see it also at CBP, which is Customs and Border Protection, where we have many Iranians and even Iranian Americans having problems at airports and not being able to get any kind of due process there because there are limited rights. I want to break down some of these different areas that I've talked about. So with USCIS, obviously we've been hearing a lot in the news lately related to denaturalization, where the government has threatened that they're going to look at how someone obtained their citizenship and make a determination if was there something fraudulent or was there some misrepresentation, and they will then try to denaturalize someone. And obviously we've heard that in the news a lot related to Elon Musk now because he's fallen out with Trump. We see that with Mamdani, who seems poised to become mayor of New York City. And this is something that we saw during the first Trump administration as well. So that's something that we need to watch and continue to be vigilant on, and keep an eye on how are we going to be addressing that. The other area we see is a ballooning and the number of cases pending at CIS again. There appears to be incredibly long delays now developing for citizenship applications, green card processing. So we can continue to see, I think, more delays over the coming years, just like we did during the first Trump administration. There are many other areas related to immigration with CIS specifically, but because we're short on time, I'm just going to be covering some of the highlights. The next agency that we're seeing many problems with is ICE. As Etan mentioned, we're seeing very concerning raids in our communities, in workplaces, even for people that have a pending application. Maybe they have a pending asylum case, a pending immigration court case. There actually have been terrible instances reported of Iranians testifying in court in their immigration court hearing on their asylum case, and ICE comes in and detains the person and takes them away. And then we obviously have heard of the issues related to CBP, where Iranian Americans are entering the United States, and Customs and Border Protection puts them into what we call secondary inspection and goes through their phones, goes through their luggage, asks them inappropriate questions related to politics and their family members in an attempt to gain information. Essentially what we're seeing is an information dump. They're taking people's phones and laptops and downloading information from them in an attempt to, broaden what they say, their national security lens and viewpoint. Now, not everyone is experiencing this, okay? And I think that's really important to explain the distinction between the rights of US citizens and green card holders and visa holders. And I know that's going to be spoken to later by one of my colleagues. Because I can't tell you how many times I've actually had US citizens who are Iranian Americans or, other immigrants call me concerned about traveling and whether or not they could be detained at the airport. Could they be denied entry at the airport? And that is not the case for US citizens. For green card holders, it is a bit different. And so, connecting with legal counsel or with organizations like NIAC and others to understand truly what are your rights at the airport are so important. Now, what basis is the government, kind of relying on all of this? And how can you be prepared in understanding, what's happening? So the context of what the government has been doing is looking at everything through a national security lens. That is their, basis of why they're justifying, they're trampling on our rights. And there were two executive orders that are particularly concerning that impact our communities most, especially as Iranian Americans. There was the executive order related to combating anti-Semitism and an executive order related to protecting the United States from terrorists. And so I think the most important, if you take away only one thing from what I'm telling you all today, is to know that US government immigration officers and agents are viewing everything as a national security decision. That's it. That's the most important thing for you to know and understand how you and your background might fit into what you're doing. And so obviously most of what I'm talking about today are related to non-US citizens. So, keep this in mind. But when they're looking at an application, for example, at the embassy for someone applying for a student visa or a work visa, or even for a green card, let's say based on marriage or based on, being parents of a US citizen, The mindset of a consular officer is they do not want to be the one that lets someone into the US who ended up being a national security risk. And they would rather deny hundreds, thousands of people visas rather than take a chance on someone if there's something that just seems off, or if there's incomplete information, or there's a contradiction. Maybe, a person wrote that, oh, I went to X university, but in a different part of their application, they forgot to mention that other university. Then the government is going to think, oh, well, you are trying to hide information from us, or you are giving us different types of information. We can't tell who you are, what your background is. And either the case will go into what we call administrative processing. Most of you probably know this as the black hole of where cases go to just sit there for weeks, if not months, if not years, before an adjudication is made. So understanding that consular officer's mindset is incredibly important for anyone who's applying at a U.S. embassy for any type of visa. And especially we've seen this be problematic for Iranians, Syrians, Lebanese, Chinese. And it's not just Republican administrations, unfortunately. Democratic administrations have been equally terrible towards our communities. And for Iranians, the most important thing to also keep in mind are the sanctions list. And so maybe sometime, Etan, we can have a separate whole like conversation about that. But most people think like, oh well, I haven't, I didn't do my military service with SEPA. Why is my visa application delayed? But it turns out then that that person, for example, worked in the oil industry or in the construction industry. Those are sanctioned industries, and those visa applications will be delayed, if not denied. So moving on, the last thing I want to mention related to interior to the US is related to the FBI's continued visits, especially of international students, and even people on green card holders, especially if they work in sensitive areas like information, AI or machine learning or physics even, things like that. And the government is all of these government agencies that I talked about, right, from State Department to Customs and Border Protection to the Immigration, CIS, the Citizenship and Immigration Office, they are looking at everything through the national security lens and looking at social media. And now we even understand through some of you might be following, there is a big court case taking place. It was just last week, this past week was the first week of testimony, and next week as well, related to the ideological deportation policy that the US government seems to have towards individuals who have been protesting against the Israeli genocide of Palestinians. And everything then is being scanned in the lens of what I talked about, those two executive orders, the protecting the US from terrorism and the anti-Semitism executive order, and social media, and is being scanned. Pro-Palestine speech is being scanned, and then we've seen obviously my client Rumeysa Ozturk and others like Mahmoud Khalil, Mohsen Madawi, Dr. Suri being detained because all they did was speak out against the genocide. Um, and so I think there's a couple of things. How am I doing on time, Etan?
You're
Doing
all
okay?
right.
Okay. Um, so a couple of areas related to, how is this going to be impacting, you or your loved ones, and what can you do about it? So briefly, I just want to talk about a few things. For my international students and those on visas like scholars or H-1B workers and even green card holders who feel that they are at high risk, especially because of their pro-Palestine activism, but others as well, especially Iranians who are studying in certain fields, because we have the case of Ali Durudi, who's done nothing wrong, but who was detained and ultimately chose to leave the United States so that he could get out of that for-profit prison that he was stuck in. Um, Creating a security plan, basically. I have a document in Etan. I'm happy to share that with you, and then you can share it with all the attendees and others related to what are some of the steps to take and how to kind of prepare yourself and maybe people around you for the hopefully unimagined, hopefully it won't happen, the unimaginable, detention and kidnapping by ICE. And so there are a few key points I want to just talk about that. One is, setting up a network of people who will be available to you and like for you to check in with them every once in a while in case you're suddenly detained by ICE. Having, for example, a list of contacts and an attorney, especially that your friends can reach out to or your family can reach out to should you suddenly become detained. And this could be, you maybe have a pending asylum case and you're worried about being detained because you have no other status besides the pending asylum case and you're worried ICE might pick you up. Or you're a student who's engaged in pro-Palestine activism. Um, for any of these scenarios, having a security plan in place like this is important. Maybe memorizing the phone number or keeping the phone number of an attorney in your pocket so that if something happens, you can reach out to them. And if you're traveling to the United States with CBP, then one of the things to do is to speak to a lawyer before you even come to the US, and that way they can track you. So what I've done with some of my clients who are at high risk is they, give me their flight information and basically I'm on call. When they land at whatever airport, they text me. When they're in line waiting for the primary inspection with CBP, they text me. And then they're supposed to text me when they're at their, getting their luggage. And if I don't hear from them in a reasonable period of time, and so let's say half an hour, then I know that something is wrong. And then we start to kick in the plan of trying to figure out what's going on. Is this something that's like a simple issue related to like mistaken identity, or is this something more problematic? So, for example, right now I was in touch with a few colleagues where a young Palestinian man, he's 22 years old, got a green card from the US Embassy, the immigrant visa, entered the United States for the first time. He has actually been in detention at Houston Airport since July 5th. They have not released him. And so, unfortunately, it took the family too long to figure out that they should get help. They were worried about resources, not being able to find a lawyer. And so this poor young man has been stuck in detention for a week. So if you're from a country where you're concerned that maybe you're targeted, again, not US citizens, and maybe you have other high risk factors, then please speak to a lawyer before you come so that you don't get stuck in detention at an airport for too long. The only other quick thing I want to say is related to like what people are calling social media like hygiene, and how to handle your social media and that sort of thing. I just want to briefly say what I've told my clients is that, you have to do what's right for you. And if you feel like you are self-silencing yourself and that does not feel right to you, then, talk to a lawyer and figure out like how might your posts impact your immigration status, right? Might it impact your student visa status? Might it impact your green card application? And what you can do about that, because there might be ways where you don't have to compromise, and still be able to stand true to your values. And for other people, it's not a risk that they can take. And so each person really needs to choose for themselves. And I've, just heard of so many instances of everyone just wiping their social media and it's really eating at them and bothering them. But they never spoke to a lawyer to figure out like how bad might it be. So I would just recommend doing that. The last part I want to talk about is like, what can we do about all of this, right? It sounds hopeless. Sounds like, oh, well, what are we going to do? There's nothing we can do. The government is too aggressive and it's really scary and I don't want to put myself at risk. But it really isn't hopeless. There are things that you can do that we as communities can do together. Like we're all coming together today to talk to you about our rights. But the few things that are important. One is get involved in your communities. I know it is hard as an immigrant to feel maybe welcome sometimes. Maybe you don't have that sense of belonging in the community that you're in. And while it might be hard to put yourself out there, you know, I'm sure there are ways, right, through different community organizations, through friends, through colleagues at work, through family members, where you can slowly get involved in your community civically. Maybe volunteering for a town committee. I serve, for example, on my human resources board for my town. Maybe you get involved with a local business association or a trade or association or a cultural association, or even maybe as an alumna of your university or your trade union. There are different ways where you can make a space for yourself in these communities and get people to know you, and people will then, want to help you and support you. And so if you're feeling afraid, if you're feeling alone, then they're able to work with you and help out. Maybe get involved in politics as well. Call your congressional office. Tell them that you're upset about what's happening to your family members back in Iran. Ask them what they're doing to try to stop, these massive ICE raids. Because unfortunately, what we're hearing throughout all of the news is, right, oh, the president is doing this, the president is doing that, the courts are doing this, the courts are doing that. Congress is doing nothing. They need to pass immigration reform. They need to stand up to the White House and demand that they follow the rules. Each of these co-equal branches of government has a role. And so talk to your congressional offices, get to know them. Calling them it's really not that scary. And hopefully, I think maybe Masih is going to be talking more about that. But it's so important. And then, you know, creating a local response network is definitely something we're seeing happen in a lot of communities. I know that they're very active in California, in Massachusetts. We're very active where we have ICE Watch at the courts. We have organizations that accompany people to the immigration court. So there are so many things that we can all do. So it's really not hopeless. And I think the vast majority, I'll leave this with my last, takeaway is the vast majority of Americans are not happy about what's happening. I cannot tell you how many hundreds of emails, phone calls, texts, letters in the mail that I have gotten, random checks. People sent me random checks saying, thank you for what you're doing for Rumeysa Ozturk. Please keep up the good work. Please continue this. We're all rooting for you, right? There's so much love out there. So please, remember that in everything that you do, because there is hope. And I'm not thinking that this is the end of of the world, but we have to exercise these muscles. If we don't, these muscles will atrophy and we will lose our freedoms and our rights. So I look forward to continuing this work with all of you.
Mahsa, thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Um, I'll now pass it to Amina for our next section.
All right, thank you. I am going to share my screen. I will need sharing requests if that's okay.
Yep. Very
Okay, great. And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, thank you for having me. I'll be doing the covering the topics of ICE interaction. Before I begin, I want to tell you a little bit about CAIR. It's it's the Council on American Islamic Relation, and it's the largest nation's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy nonprofit organization in the country. Its mission is to enhance understanding of Islam and protect civil liberties and promote justice and empower American Muslims. We have a lot of programs for the community, and one of those programs services is providing immigration legal services, which is the department that I work under. Today's topic will cover what is ICE. I'm sure we heard of that, but just a little bit of understanding of ICE and some other sub-agencies under the Department of Homeland Security. And what should we do when we interact with them, and briefly go over some safety plans, but I think it was already mentioned in the prior presentation. So what is ICE? ICE is a sub-agency of the Department of Homeland Security. It's a the Department of Homeland Security is a cabinet level department of the U.S. federal government. It was established in 2002, and DHS is one of the largest, and it consolidated many agencies underneath that. The three main sub-agencies under the Department of Homeland Security that deal with immigration are ICE, CBP, and USCIS. ICE and CBP deal with immigration law enforcement, while USCIS processes and adjudicate affirmative types of immigration application. So for USCIS, its main function is to process and make decision about immigration status and citizenship related application. CBP is responsible for enforcement of immigration laws at or near the border. You will see CBP at the airports when you return from international flights. CBP claims that their jurisdiction is within 100 miles of the border and ports of entry. So that is approximately about 2/3 of the US population, or about 200 million people that live within 100 miles of the US border, according to various sources, including the ACLU. We have been seeing ICE officers conduct raids and arrests in Southern California along with CBP. And so the reason why is because they are within that 100-mile radius. And then for ICE, they are one of the principal investigative arms of DHS, and they conduct arrests, raids, detention, deportations, and initiate removal proceedings in immigration court. Immigration court is not under the Department of Homeland Security. Immigration court is under the Department of Justice. HSI is an office within ICE that may assist with workplace raids or other immigration enforcement. So you may see law enforcement with either ICE, police, CBP, HSI conduct arrests and raids, and they're all part of the same umbrella under the Department of Homeland Security. And regardless of what agency that you see, your rights would be the same. So before we get into the specific rights and tips, we should understand some of the people that are at risk or that are at a higher risk. Generally, I should have been prioritized before all these activities that started in June. They were prioritizing people with serious criminal convictions, people with prior deportations, or people that they think may be a threat to national security. But it seems that they are also targeting anyone without status, regardless of whether they are have a serious criminal records, and those that they assume may have violated the terms of their immigration status or some immigration law. How they determine whether someone is out of status or undocumented, it seems like they're targeting people without warrants, so therefore there's a lot of concerns about racial profiling. You can see, I think Masih may be talking about what's going on, but I was just pulling up the numbers and here, and you can see that it's not really about people who have criminal records. It's about 71% of the people that they have detained don't have criminal records. Many of them, and a lot of people that we have been consulting with, have been here for 5, 10, 15, 20 years with no criminal record and have a lot of ties to the community here. So what should you do when you encounter ICE? It's also important to understand the tactics that they employ. They collect data from various sources to identify where you live and your relatives as well. They have used unmarked cars, and what I mean by unmarked cars is sometimes it may not have license plates, and sometimes it may not indicate the agency that they work for. So it's just looks like a plain civilian car. They also have been known to wear masks and wear civilian clothes as well. They come, and if they are excuse me, and if they are looking for someone specific, they tend to come early and also wait until you're in a public location. They also conduct collateral arrests, meaning that if they're looking for someone specific and they find that person, and they may also investigate everyone around them at that location and arrest the other people as well, regardless of whether they have an arrest warrant for those other people. They oft they also can obtain your information through your private cell phone, and they have been known to pretend to be other agents as well. So here are some basic rights that you should know, and some advice that you should keep in mind when interacting with ICE. First, if you are in one of those vulnerable groups that they could be targeting, it's recommended that you remain silent. You do not have to answer questions about your immigration status. If you are concerned about that, you can show an ID that doesn't show your immigration status, such as a student ID. Um, and for the rest of the other questions, you can exercise your right to remain silent. You can also ask to speak to an attorney. You should not sign anything without the advice from the attorney reviewing it on whether, on how that document would impact your situation or your immigration status. You can also ask for an interpreter. You should ask for an interpreter every time you speak to the federal agency if you do not understand what they are asking you. And you can then ask to make a call as well. So it's important that you do remember important people's numbers that you can rely on to call to help you in this emergency situation. And next, you can deny access to certain locations that you have an expectation of privacy, unless they have a judicial warrant. Other tips to keep in mind is that you should be calm. You shouldn't run. If you run, that will also cause suspicion and cause them to run after you. And you shouldn't lie or provide false information or documents. It's rather, you should just remain silent instead of providing false documents or misleading information. And next, you shouldn't obstruct their activities in places where they have a right to be, such as public locations. Some of the rights you have in ICE interaction stems from the Fourth Amendment. In the context of the Fourth Amendment, the expectation of privacy is not absolute and varies between public and private places. Generally, there's a higher expectation of privacy in private places like your home, personal belongings, while public spaces offer lower or no expectation of privacy. You can deny ICE access to places where you have an expectation of privacy if they don't have a judicial warrant. So let's take a look at the difference between a judicial warrant and administrative warrant. Here you will see the to your left, where my arrow is at, this is an example of a judicial warrant, and the right is an example of an administrative warrant. The first noticeable difference is the top where you see the title of the document. A judicial warrant has the title of the court whereas on the right, it has the title of the agency, the Department of Homeland Security. And then it has ICE underneath that, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And this is a warrant to remove a person, whereas this over here, this to the left, it says it's a warrant to search and detain a person. Next, you're going to look for the person's name and address. So they can own, the warrant only limits the scope of search to the person and the person's address. That address could be their home or that address could be a workplace. But if they are looking for a person and they go to the person's workplace, but the address on the warrant says their home, then that warrant is invalid to search the workplace. Also, you want to make sure that the expiration date is, or excuse me, the date of it is not expired. So even 1 day expiration means that the warrant is not valid. Last, you want to look at who signed it, and you want to look at the title of the person that signed it. And it should say judge underneath it. On the right side, an administrative warrant is signed by an immigration officer, and an immigration officer is not a judge and can not sign judicial warrants. So if you determine that it is an administrative warrant, that will then indicate that you have a right to deny access to the space area that they are seeking access to. There is no law that obligates you to cooperate or consent to their requests for access. So the only way that they can come into a place that where you expect privacy is either a judicial warrant or your consent. If they don't have the judicial warrant, you can deny consent. But if they do have a judicial warrant, and it's very rare that they do, here are some of the things that you can do. First, ask for the identification of the officer, and then review it to make sure that it's a valid warrant, and then also document what happens. You can record what they're doing, and so that they and then also record what they are doing, and also understand the scope of the search and make sure that they stay within that parameters of what's described in the warrant. If they go to your home, which they don't do as much, that we've been seeing, they've been targeting more people in the open space. But if they do, the rights that I just mentioned or the tips that I just mentioned should apply, where you ask for a warrant before, and if they don't, you can deny them access. Other tips, if they come to your home, is not to open the door and ask to see the warrant through the window, or ask them to slip it under the door, or if you have a camera phone, ask them to put it against the camera phone. And so if they don't want to show you the warrant, then most likely they don't have a judicial warrant and you can deny them access. I wouldn't recommend opening the door to talk to them, because if they that could lead them to be more aggressive and enter that space. Similar advice also applies to if they're accessing your a place of employment or school. at places of employment school, there may be areas that are considered public spaces and they can be there. But then there are also areas in those locations that are considered private and restricted. And it's recommended that your employer and schools put up signs to designate which areas are private and restricted so that your employers and students can feel safe in those locations. And you should understand what your policies are for your employment or for your school, and hopefully they've implemented a policy where they don't require their staff to cooperate and that they designate one person to be the liaison or understand how to review a judicial warrant and be able to deny access if they don't have one. I want to show you an example of, well, there may be limited time, so I won't show you the video. But about 2 weeks ago, ICE entered a car wash at Fullerton in Orange County in California, and it was recorded where the owners of the car wash respectfully and calmly asked them to leave and said that asked for the warrant and repeatedly asked for the warrant, and they had also people recording that interaction and said that this is for a customer. Are you a customer for the car wash? If you're not, you don't have consent to be here. Please leave if you don't have a warrant. And they ended up leaving. It is kind of scary to stand up and resist lawfully, but with people around recording it, it does help with your interaction with ICE. Similarly, places of worship like the masjid, you should put signs around that area to designate that it's only for the masjid members or guests. And if you're able to have one point of entry so that you can filter the people that are coming in, and if you see ICE agents, then ask them for a warrant or ask them to leave. There have been reports that they've been to churches and mosques in California, and then the people there have successfully denied them access because they didn't have a warrant. In your car, they can stop you, and if you are stopped while you're driving, it's recommended that you crack the door open just enough to where you can show them your ID, and the passenger can refuse to identify or show the ID, and then all of the other recommendation apply on whether you should exercise your right to remain silent. And public places is quite different because they don't need a judicial warrant to be in public places, but they can stop a person and ask for their name and immigration status to investigate. So a lot of the arrests that we're seeing is without a warrant, and they can arrest somebody without a warrant. ICE can arrest someone with an arrest warrant if they have proof that that person is not is not authorized to be in the U.S. And ICE can also arrest someone without warrant if they have proof after their interaction with that person if they're not authorized. But what some of the things that we're seeing is that they're not believing what some people are saying, that they are U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents, or they're asking very minimal questions and then detaining them anyways and figuring out what their status is later. So for public places, if ICE stops you, you can show them your ID, and then you can exercise your right to remain silent and refuse to answer any other questions. You can then ask if you're free to leave after you tell them your name, and if they say that you can't, then it's recommended that you should exercise your right to remain silent. If you see that happening, you can record it for the protection of that person that's interacting with ICE. Having a recorder may put some pressure on them to try to follow the law and not use excessive force on the person that they're interacting with. Yeah, so I had mentioned that if you witness ICE interaction, you can record from a safe space, but they have been more aggressive with people that are ICE watchers, and so be careful in recording what's happening and making sure that you're not in too close or interfering or in their way, because then you could be at risk of then being arrested for obstructing their activity. Safety plan. So for those people that are at risk of being detained, they should first consult with an immigration attorney to see what their options are, and if they have options, take those steps to apply for those forms of relief or immigration benefits. If they don't have any options, they should also make plans to, if they are in a situation where they're detained, by collecting certain documentation. And make childcare plans for their family members and children. They should gather all the important documents in a location and inform their point of contact or trusted friend or relative on where that is, because some of the problems and challenges that we're having is that when we get notified of someone's detained, if they don't have those documents, it's hard to communicate with them and their family members to collect those documents when they're detained. Also, if they have been here for more than 2 years, it's important to start collecting those documents to show that they've lived here for more than 2 years, so that they can challenge the government's efforts to put them in expedited removal. Expedited removal is a process where they're trying to deport people through a faster route by avoiding immigration proceedings. And they're applying that to people that have been here for less than 2 years. But if you can show that you've been here for more than 2 years, that hopefully could help that person be placed in immigration court proceedings. Another option to avoid expedited removal is and if that person fears returning to their home country, is to ask for a credible fear interview. But all that would be reviewed in a very comprehensive immigration consultation with an immigration attorney. So that should be the first thing that someone should do in preparing a safety plan. And here are some resources. I can't speak for other states, but in California, if you go to this website at the CCIJ, California Rapid Response Hotline, you will see a list of rapid response numbers and resources for different regions in California. Specifically where I'm at in Southern California, the number for the Orange County rapid response is here. And then for the Los Angeles areas, there's 2 numbers here. And then if you want to reach us for a consultation, we provide services to California residents, and you can reach us by phone, by email, or do walk-ins every Tuesday from 1:30 to 3, or you can submit an online intake request through that QR code, or you can find that intake form on our website. Uh, Thank you. I think that's all that I have. I'm sorry if I took too much time.
Amina, thank you so much for that comprehensive what to do practical guidance that people are needing so much right now. Really appreciate that. Again, this will be recorded and we will be following up with those resources. I mean, if you could track down that video, the link to that video and share it with our attendees, I think that would be great as well. I think it's really helpful for people to see examples of folks standing on their rights, knowing their rights, and saving folks.
Yeah, the link is in my slides, but I wasn't sure if I was over time. So if people want the slides, I can share it and they can find a link there.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, now I will, just to keep things moving and to shift gears towards community advocacy and support systems, Masih, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending on a Saturday and really appreciate all the great questions people are putting in. So continue to do that. The other panelists, as those questions are coming through, will answer it. And I think we have some time for Q&A at the end. I'm going to keep my part of the presentation fairly simple and fairly quick because I think the Q&A portion of these sessions is oftentimes the most important, so we can answer your questions. What I'm going to focus on is how you can support, how you can get involved, what you can do from a practical perspective. I know many of us, especially those who have the privilege of being US citizens, folks who are seeing their families being torn apart, or folks who have neighbors and allies who want to support, sometimes don't know exactly what we need to be doing right now. And so I have 4 levels of engagement where at any of these levels, I think it'll be a huge value add. Level number 1 is just staying informed through trusted messengers and sources like NIAC, like CAIR, like IRAP, like CIPC, and other reputable CBOs, community-based organizations. And with that comes additional responsibility of don't spread unverified information, whether that's on Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. You might see a video of, oh my God, there's people in the streets. They look like law enforcement. Is it ICE? I'm going to share it everywhere. There are already systems in place through rapid response networks to address those type of things. So if you are involved in those rapid response networks and you can uplift it to the right people, great. But I think if you just share that information without any context of what that is, it might be a DUI checkpoint, right? You're going to cause fear for people, and you don't like in this moment of heightened fear. We don't want to continue to kind of trigger our community members. And we've seen whether it's at local grocery stores, Iranian markets, or at farms, businesses, people just aren't showing up, workers aren't showing up, and we don't want to continue to contribute to that. So at the very low level, level 1, stay informed, sign up for NIAC, CAIR, IRAP, CIPC's emails. I'll actually share a link of how to get more engaged with CIPC in the chat shortly when I get to level 3. Sign up for that Google form. We'll put you on our text list, we'll put you on our email list, and we'll let you know in California what you can do to support. Level 2, and Mahsa mentioned this earlier, donate. Again, donate to NIAC, to CAIR, to CIPC, to IRAP, so we can continue to do presentations like these. We're doing them via Zoom, we're doing them in person, we're doing them in Farsi, we're doing them in Arabic, we're doing them in as many ways as possible to get community members the information they need. We're also doing them for health clinics and businesses to really share how they can make sure that their employees, their patients are protected. So that's level 2. Now, level 3 is the one that I'm most interested in because that really means doing work at the local or statewide level. I'm going to kind of highlight a few things that are happening here in California to just get you all a sense of, look, at the state level, at the city level, at the county level, you can still do something. I know immigration is a federal issue, and oftentimes we're like, well, Congress is terrible, the president's terrible, there's nothing we can do, and we feel helpless. But there are still lots of ways that we can work to protect our communities. At the statewide level right now, there are two bills moving forward. I'm going to use the bill numbers SB 627 and SB 805. SB 805 has a cool name to it. It's called the No Vigilante Act. And both of these bills are really meant to make sure that law enforcement, uh, particularly federal, but also local and state, are not taking advantage of our community members. SB 627 says that officers shall not wear any kind of mask or personal disguise while interacting with the public. There's some exceptions for health and safety reasons, etc., for like operational needs, like SWAT, for example. But really, this is targeting what's happening right now with everyone in law enforcement, especially these federal officials, covering their faces and really kidnapping members of our community off the street. So that's something at the statewide level that a couple of lawmakers are pushing forward. The SB 805 really pairs well with that, the No Vigilante Act, and that's about having some kind of public, visible requirement for law enforcement to show that they are law enforcement. You all have already seen all the videos of folks asking for badge numbers, asking for names, and them not being provided. This is another thing that, again, the state is trying to do to make sure that there's some level of accountability and transparency. Additionally, the bill would require notice to local law enforcement every time there's a federal action, which also allows for better health, safety, and notice requirements so that things aren't happening without local officials knowing. So both of those are things at the statewide level, for example, that we've been working on that will really go a long way in protecting our communities. At the local level, at the city level, at the county level, there are also a lot of other things that are happening. I think a lot of folks have heard through the first Trump administration about sanctuary policies. I use the quotes because, like, the reality is there's no policy that will protect you from every and any kind of federal action. So I don't want to mislead folks in thinking that if your city has a sanctuary policy, then you're completely safe and free. But what really these policies do is make sure that local law enforcement is not engaging with ICE, is not supporting ICE. And we're doing a lot to continue to push these types of policies. We were able to pass it in Los Angeles in December, but in localities like Huntington Park more recently, we were actually even passed much more strong sanctuary policies that give citizens the right of action if the city violates the ordinance and essentially does not do what it's saying it will do to protect its community. So that the sanctuary policy one, I'm not going to go into more detail about because I feel like that's the most talked about one. But there are other things like legal defense funds. A lot of cities will have some funding. It could be as low as 50,000 to as high as 1 million, where they can contribute to make sure that organizations like CAIR and others have the legal resources to provide free legal services to community members. It goes back to really the concept of you need to talk to an attorney whenever you're taking any kind of action on immigration right now, because it's not like business as usual. I would have told people, even in business as usual, always talk to an attorney. But now you're at such a high risk of putting yourself, your family in a vulnerable position that you need to make sure that you're talking to an attorney. We know attorneys are expensive. So when we can provide city and state funding to community-based organizations that are trusted, who speak the same languages that we speak, that are from the cultures that we are familiar with, they can provide that legal advice to you for free. And so that's why these legal defense funds at the county and city level have been amazing. Additionally, unfortunately, because of the fear, because a lot of the targeting of family members of those who are single family, single kind of income families are being impacted. Some cities are actually putting some funding out there for impacted families to be able to support with food, with rent. It's not going to be a ton of money, but any little bit can help. And again, counties, cities are going to have more money than individuals are to contribute here. So we've seen some initiatives already happening at the city and county level when it comes to food access, when it comes to rent assistance, or even when it comes to even talking about rent moratoriums, eviction policies to make sure that impacted families are protected. And then lastly, similar to the no masking and identification ordinances happening at the state level, you can do that at the local level. And at the local level, you can always go for even a stronger policy than at the state level. The state kind of sets the bar of like what has to be happening at the minimum. And then the local entity, whether the city or county, can go even beyond that. So if any of that sounds compelling to you, I'm going to share just a Google form here in the chat that our friends at NIAC will share with you all. If you're in California and you want to get engaged and involved with this type of work, fill out that Google form, and we'll be in contact with you to see how we can coordinate. Again, we know that this is a moment that people want to take action, and we want to make sure that we take that energy, get united. What we've seen recently, just because of the complete, completely inhumane ways that this administration is working, is people coming together like they did in the first Trump administration. I think a lot of us saw those images of people at the airport when the Muslim ban first started, or we've seen how folks responded when families were being torn apart and kids were being put in cages in the first Trump administration. I think just the violence and the sheer lack of accountability with which the administration is working is again bringing folks together. And I think it's our time to build power at the local, at the state level. And then obviously, again, I think Mahsa mentioned this, you need to get involved civically, whether it's voting in your local elections. And then obviously we have midterms coming up in 2026. In the first Trump administration, we saw that there was a wave of congressional representatives like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, AOC, and others who came and really were able to slow down this hateful, xenophobic agenda that the Trump administration is pushing. And we've seen hope in what's happening with the mayoral race in New York, right, with Mamdani having those principles. So right now is the time to continue to get engaged if you are a citizen and you can vote. And the last thing I'll say in terms of the fourth level of engagement, I know this will be for a smaller group of folks, but if you're a lawyer and you're stuck at a corporate job and you're thinking like, hey, I want to give back, this is the time to give back. A lot of folks came in to nonprofit work in the post 9/11 world. Then others came in during the first Trump administration. We can definitely use your support. Organizations like the ones on this call can definitely use your support. But if you've done policy work, if you've done communications, if you've done organizing work, again, I would encourage you to look at job openings and see how you can give back more directly. I'll end with again emphasizing how important it is to make sure that if you or a family member is facing any kind of immigration issue, make sure to talk to a trusted attorney. If you don't have the funding to do it, if you can't pay a private attorney, that's completely understandable. Most of us honestly don't have that kind of money. That's what the community-based organizations here are. If you see and you Google someone and you see that they're a notary, that's not someone you should be going to get legal advice from. Doesn't matter if they've show you all of the cases that they've been successful for. We've been on the other side where we've seen people being deported and detained because of just a lack of legal knowledge, and that's why you need attorneys. So make sure in the urgency of trying to get yourself and your family member help, you're not going to the wrong people. And that's especially true if you don't have like a pending court case or if you don't have anything that's super time sensitive. I know sometimes when you reach out to community-based organizations, there's a wait list. They might take a couple of weeks to get back to you. If you tell them that it's something urgent, they'll prioritize you. And if you don't have something that's as important or as a higher priority when it comes to time sensitivity, just be a little patient. It'll go a long way in making sure you and your family members are protected. With that, I'll turn it back over to Etan.
Sorry, I was muted. Masih, thank you so much for that address. I really appreciate it. You got me excited hearing some of the local advocacy and legislation being proposed in California. On my side in New York, I know there's the New York for All Act, which would protect folks' data when they seek public services from being shared with ICE. And I know we're also it's so important to set the groundwork state by state, city by city, so it gets to the federal level eventually as well. And in recent weeks, we saw the No Secret Police Act introduced by representatives in Congress, which would also similarly prevent ICE agents from masking and would require them to identify. There's the Protecting Sensitive Locations Act as well. And then there's the Neighbors Not Enemies Act. So I think we can keep pressing on all these, and so important that folks get involved at all levels to keep the pressure going. Thank you so much. I will now pass it to Stephanie, last but not least of our presenters, to talk through some of the impacts on displaced people outside of the United States.
Sure, thank you, Todd. I'm going to quickly, I think I can do this, share my screen, if that works. Is that working?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me and for inviting me to this really rich and informative and broad-ranging group of presentations today. I'm going to be mindful of time, but speak a little bit today about some of the Trump administration's policies that affect particularly refugees and displaced people overseas. Just for general awareness, but also kind of to remind folks about how even these policies that might not necessarily immediately affect folks who are listening today are actually connected to everything that's happening in our own neighborhoods as well, and why the same kind of strategies for resistance and organizing are going to be important broadly in the context of all of these immigration policies. So I work for IRAP, the International Refugee Assistance Project. We're a global legal aid and advocacy organization that works on behalf of refugees and others who are seeking safety, particularly here in the United States. And I wanted to quickly mention two of the Trump administration's ban policies that have come out in the last 6 months, and what they look like and what they mean for folks who are refugees or displaced people who are trying to come to the US for safety and have not actually made it here yet. So as you may know, in January, President Trump issued an executive order that is essentially a refugee resettlement ban. It's called the Realigning the United States Refugee Admissions Program executive order. And as soon as he signed it, it essentially indefinitely suspended the US Refugee Admissions Program, which allows refugees to come to the US and live here permanently safely. It also indefinitely suspended any decisions on open applications for refugees who are in the process of navigating that system to come here. And it significantly impacted funding for NGOs and international organizations that are involved in this process. And as a result, as soon as he signed this order, the government stopped accepting new refugee applications, stopped processing applications that were in place already or new ones that were in the process of being created, and also effectively shut down many offices both in the United States and local communities as well as overseas that are involved in this program. For folks who are not aware of what the US Refugee Admissions Program is, this is the government program that has been resettling refugees to the United States for several decades now. It is a similar immigration benefit that people are receiving to asylum for folks who are going through the asylum application process in the US. The biggest difference is that refugees go through all of their interviews and their processing before they ever even step foot in the United States. And over 3 million refugees from around the world have come to the US and integrated into our communities and become our parents and our grandparents and our neighbors since 1975. And so it is an essential program. It's an essential form of protection that the United States does offer to people who need safety. The people who access this program from around the world do so through a number of ways. Many of them do that through referrals from the UN Refugee Agency and from the United Nations. But during the Biden administration, there was also a new private sponsorship program that was created so that local communities, families, religious communities, churches, mosques could also sponsor individual refugees to come to the US. And there have also been a number of, in some cases, many years long special programs that the government created for specific groups and populations to come this way as well, including Iraqis and Syrians who have family in the US and we're seeking to reunify with them and find some permanent safety in the US, and also a program that was specifically designed for Iranian religious minorities. And so there has been a really broad range of folks who have benefited from this historically and who were immediately and very negatively impacted by this Trump administration's refugee ban iteration, which is very similar to what they did in 2017. And so was a real deja vu moment for a lot of advocates in this space as well. The current status of this ban is that it is in litigation. And actually, IRAP, my organization, filed a lawsuit on behalf of affected refugees and organizations shortly after the executive order came down. And it is in the process of being litigated at the moment. The refugee ban remains in place today, but a judge has ordered the government to resume processing for a certain number of cases, particularly for people who actually were scheduled to arrive when and had flights booked and had travel planned, and the government had made all of these arrangements for them to be flown to the United States. And all of their flights were canceled as soon as the ban came down. So for that population, there's a kind of immediate attention from the courts into thinking through what it would look like to resume processing for them. But everybody else who was in process or who was hoping to come to the US through this program is, for the moment, in kind of this indefinite suspension and limbo. And the president does have broad authority generally over refugee admissions and this program. And so it's one of those things that is both, it was a very heartbreaking ban to come down and also in many ways predictable, and something that a lot of people are continuing to organize to fight against, but we're kind of in the middle of seeing what that end result might look like. Similarly to the refugee ban, as everybody knows, there's also Trump's June travel ban that was issued through a presidential proclamation that banned travelers from a whole host of countries from entering the United States or receiving visas to come to the US. And there were two groups of countries, partially restricted countries and fully restricted countries, slightly different rules for who was banned based on which country you're from and which list it was on. But essentially it had a similar broad impact and is having a broad impact on individuals who were in immigration processes or who qualify for valid visas to the United States and are now being told that they cannot enter as long as this ban is in place. It impacted people who were outside the United States and had not yet been issued a visa as of June 9th, 2025, which means for people from those countries who are already in the United States, this ban itself is not supposed to immediately impact them. But for people who are in the process of being interviewed by embassies or getting their documents together, that subset of people does continue to be immediately impacted. There are some exceptions, and there's some case-by-case exception options that we have yet to see how those are going to play out, and some categorical exceptions for groups of people who are not impacted. But the intent of it is to prevent a large number of people from a large number of countries from actually being able to travel into the United States. And so that is kind of the ban that's in place there as well. And one thing that I would just note about that travel ban is that it also impacts refugees, even though displaced people are not the target of this ban, because many refugees who are not able to access safety in other ways, including through the refugee admissions program, apply for other pathways to come here too. Many displaced people have family here, or they get accepted to study in college here, or they are able to get employment visas here. And so there's a large number of people who kind of remain unsafe where they are, who are relying on those types of pathways to come to the US, who won't be able to do that. And also, I think as many know, families who face displacement and forced migration from their countries of origin often end up separated or split up over the course of their journeys. And separations will be prolonged, obviously, for people who are trying to use family-based pathways or other immigrant and non-immigrant visa pathways to see each other again. And so we know that this travel ban too is going to impact in particularly negative ways, refugees and displaced people who are trying to find the kind of permanent safety and status here in the United States or reunification with their family that they're entitled to and are now being told that they cannot come in. One of the things that I really want to emphasize about both of these travel and refugee bans is that these are policies that are taking place, again, in the same context as everything that we're seeing happen inside the United States. And so I think it's really easy for us to think of travel bans and refugee bans and kind of people out there as one category, and then ICE enforcement in our neighborhoods and our communities as another category. But I think it's really actually important for us to see these things as happening in the same context. And that's a context in which, first, I think, to what Mahsa was saying earlier, the national security lens is being used as a pretext for punitive actions against certain racial and ethnic groups, certain political profiles, and anyone that this administration and the government is saying is the enemy. And they're weaponizing the immigration system that we have and all of its flaws, to be honest, against really broad groups of people. They're advancing a very specific vision of what this country and our neighborhoods should look like, and they're kind of using it as a political tool. And so I think when we think about the uptick in ICE enforcement actions in our neighborhoods and our communities, and when we think about increased enforcement at international airports for people who are flying in who do have valid visas or are facing new risks and interrogation, and we think about people who should be allowed to come to the United States and are now being told that based on their nationality they can't, this is one political agenda. It's a kind of set unified agenda, and it's being used as a multi-pronged tool. And so I think the organization that we're doing, and that goes to, I think, a lot of what Masih was saying as well, at the state and local level, will actually benefit even the people who are negatively impacted by these types of travel bans and international policies, because they're all connected, and none of these policies are being rolled out in isolation. So I feel very strongly, and my colleagues do too, that actually opposing any one of these things is a form of opposing all of them, and really thinking through how to kind of strategically use our positions, our locations, our voices in our local and our national communities to push back against these types of things and to organize really strategically against them is going to be the crucial tool that we have at our disposal in resistance of these things. And so I think to the extent that we're worried about undocumented neighbors, and we're worried about people who are seeking asylum, and we're worried about refugees who are outside the US, and our students in our communities and our parents who are trying to come here, I think we're kind of looking at one big picture. And so it's a real privilege to be here today and to get to hear a little bit from each of the other panelists about how they're tackling these issues in their work. And I appreciate the opportunity to kind of, raise some of this angle as well. So thank you, Etan.
No, thank you so much, Stephanie. It's a crucial angle. It's an angle that is not we know it because we speak to people. We speak to people who we've gotten so hard to get accepted to U.S. university and then are denied, and so forth. So I just thank you so much for that. I think we can just spend the last few minutes talking through some questions together. I'd like again to encourage all the attendees. If you have questions, please submit them in the Q&A function. We'll do our best to get to them in the remaining time. We also have an intake form with NIAC, a contact link for you as well. If you have any questions, I'm also happy to address them afterwards. But I'll kick things off with some questions that were submitted prior for folks. I know we talked about a lot. We got broad strokes, but just getting back to initial simple advice. What are the most urgent steps individuals and families can take right now to prepare a worst case scenario plan to document their legal status, given the recent increase in ICE activity? What specific documents can be gathered, and how can families ensure that this information is accessible in the event that someone is detained? Amina, maybe we'll go to you first with that, Amina.
Yeah, I think as a US citizen, you can have your real ID with you, a copy of your passport if you have it, or a copy of your naturalization certificate if you have it, or a copy of your birth certificate that you have, if you have it on maybe your electronic device, so that you can show them if they are not satisfied with the real ID that you provided them. If you're a lawful permanent resident, you can show them your green card. Now, for those that are undocumented or have pending application, you can have your EAD, unexpired employment authorization card, and a copy of an application, a proof of receipt of a pending application. And if you are undocumented and don't have anything to show, then just show them an ID that doesn't indicate your immigration status, and then exercise your right to remain silent. Um, and also exercise the rights, your other rights too, to ask for a lawyer, to not sign anything without talking to your lawyer, and to call your and to request to make a call. But those are the documents that you can carry it around with you. Many of the people that aren't that don't have status but that have something pending typically have um, an employment authorization card that corresponds to that pending application, such as if you have a pending TPS, pending asylum, um, or pending adjustment of status, or some other forms of relief. So an unexpired EAD should be sufficient as well.
Thank you, Amina. We have a question I see in the chat here as well. What should we do if we're approached by masked agents while in a car? I'm a green card holder, but please answer this question in various scenarios.
Yeah, if you're a green card holder and they stop you while you're driving, you can show them your valid driver's license and let them know that you are a lawful permanent resident. And then you can show them your ID by just cracking your window so that they can look at it. I wouldn't roll down my window all the way, and keep your doors locked.
Thank you. And I can speak to, I've gone down quite the rabbit hole of YouTube crime auditors, police auditors, folks who are checking that that law enforcement are going through the proper procedures in differentiating between detaining someone and just asking questions. Because it's always anyone's right to not answer questions that you don't have to. And that's certainly something I always like to be clear with. 3 questions you can ask are, am I free to go? Is one very simple way you can get at that for folks, but would recommend going down that YouTube rabbit hole. It does empower you. Last question, or some more questions for folks. Let's see. Apologies. With increased monitoring of political activity and broader searches, what are the current digital privacy risks for immigrants and their allies? What steps can people take to protect their data?
I can speak to what protecting your data when you are encountering CBP at the airport and ports of entry, because I think there's a few questions in the Q&A box about that. So CBP has a right to take your phone at the airport, regardless of your immigration status. They can take your phone even as a US citizen. So to protect your data, you should enable some passcode and disabled facial recognition. And also you can uninstall all those apps and emails so that if some reason they get access to your phone after they confiscated it, there shouldn't be any information on there. And then you can re-add those apps after your release from CBP.
And the
Thank
only
you.
thing I'll add is if you are connected to an attorney and you have some information online that you want to see if it could be removed, there are apps and there's services that can be used. It costs money, and I wouldn't recommend every individual, every kind of like Hassan and Hussein or to do. But if it is something that your lawyer thinks would be advantageous for you to do in a particular situation, there are options out there.
Now, in regards to your social media in general, I would recommend that if you're not a US citizen, to be careful about what you post, because if you're planning to remain in the US or file for any future application, they will investigate your social media in adjudicating and processing your application. And we have seen that they have retaliated against people that have expressed views that is not in line with their own policies, and use that as a way to target, deny, or revoke a person's immigration status. Khalil Mahmoud is an example of someone who is a lawful permanent resident, and they are trying to revoke and he's married to a US citizen, and they're trying to revoke his green card, initially based on some ambiguous law that allows for the Department of State to determine that a person's activity may be adversarial to U.S. foreign policy, but it's very obvious that it's just a retaliatory action against him that is infringing on his First Amendment rights, and hopefully he'll prevail. Fortunately, he's been released from detention, but his immigration proceedings still remains open.
Thank you for that, Amina. It looks like we are at time, folks. I want to be respectful of everyone's Saturday. Thank you all so much for being here. I will add, just for folks who want to get involved, NIAC volunteers and chapters across the country are organizing. We are recruiting. We are trying to schedule meetings with members of Congress so they can hear from their constituents about what is going on directly, and to give them all the help they need in responding to stick up for our community rights, our constitutional rights. So thank you all so much for being here. We will share some final links in the chat. Please, if you are not signed up for a NIAC chapter and you want to take action, sign up for one. If you don't have the time but have the resources to support this work, please donate to our organization. If you want to take some space to be in community and take care of yourself in a different way, please consider signing up for our mental health and wellness session next week. I've got 3 great Iranian American mental health professionals who have agreed to support our community and show up in that space as well. So thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it. We will follow up with all of the links and resources that have been shared today. We'll follow up with a recording of this presentation for folks, for you to share around your community. Thank you again. Hope you all stay safe and have a good rest of your weekend. Thank you, Stephanie, Amina, Masih. Really appreciate it.